I'm going to make a hung hem for my sock. It's a really nice way of casting on, especially if you're not using a ribber. You don't have to worry about finishing the top. When you're done, it's finished, and I'll show you a quick and easy way so that there's not even any threads that you have to weave in. So I'm going to start today over here on the green. This is actually where I do my heels, one green to the next, and it's my 3 o'clock position. The yarn carrier right here is at the 6 o'clock. So what I've done was I've stopped the yarn carrier coming up to that section. So now I'm going to carry on with my waste yarn. For my waste yarn, I use number 10 crocheting cotton, and when I'm done, I actually wind it back on, and then I'll carry on using it. So I've come up to my position, and I pull my waste yarn through. I actually am going to pull it through on my first needle. The green is right here, and the needle directly after it is going to be the first stitch. I like to bring the waste yarn around and catch that also, because then I'm not going to have a bit of a gap in here when I start. So I've got my yarn ready to go. I have the yarn and I'm just threading it through my carrier. There's a little bit of a tail here. I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm just going to tuck it right in. I have a clip, and this is where I want to start. So right here, this little blue part, that is where I want to do my first stitch. So that's where I am going to start. I have a threaded yarn carrier with a slot. So I'm just going to feed it through the slot, make sure that my tension and everything is ready on the machine, and here we go. Pull a little slack out of the yarn so that the clip is right at my first stitch, and I knit 1 round. I do count this round. Now that I have most of that round knit, what I do is I take a little clip. They're stitch markers actually. I bought a huge bag of them, so I have many. What I do is I mark that first bar. So when you're doing the first stitch, it's not the actual stitch that we're looking for, it's the bar. So you'll see right here, that was the first stitch, and this is the first bar between those two. So I'm going to take this little stitch marker and I'm going to thread it in here so I can easily find that bar. So now I'm going to carry on. That was my first row. I am also going to mark that very last stitch. That is the last stitch on that first row. So I have a marker on the very first bar and a marker on the very second bar. What I do with my yarn tail is when I come around, I'm going to take off my clip and put it aside. I don't need it. I'm actually going to take that tail and I'm just going to loop it over 1 needle and continue knitting. I'm going to do it again and carry on knitting. I'll do that about 4, sometimes 5 times. What that does is it just knits that tail into the yarn, into the sock, and I do not have to weave it in. It's done. It's that easy. I take my scissors, I cut it off. I leave about 2 or 3 inches. The reason I leave 2 or 3 inches is in case I've made a mistake and I need to cast on and start over. So that way I've got something that I can grab onto. So I just leave that hang in there. So I finished knitting my rounds. I am going to do a 1.5 inch hem. The gauge on my machine that I'm knitting right now is going to be 11 rows per inch. In order for me to do this hem, I'm going to do 33 rounds. So let's go. I've done 8 already. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So this is 33. I've actually knit the full 33. When I join them together, I don't count that as a row. I just consider it as finishing things off. So I'm coming up to the start. I actually take my weights off, and I've got a little bag, you can see that. I keep them in this handy container, and the reason I do that is because when I drop them, they don't go rolling across the floor. So what I need to do is now I need to start hanging. I pick up the sock where it started, I grab it from the middle. Now this is where doing that little marker comes in handy. So I grab that marker and I just hang it over my first stitch. So I knit the first stitch, and it's the bar that was between the first and the second. So I'm going to hang it on the first stitch. There we go. And I can take the marker off. I don't need it anymore. I had just happened to catch the waste yarn on the stitch marker. I'm just going to move it out of the way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take every one of those little bars and I'm going to hang them. So this was the first one, and in between you can see this one right here. I'm going to grab it with my little hook and hang it over the needle. Sometimes you split the yarn, you want to make sure you get the whole thing. It's very important when you're doing this to make sure that your cast on yarn is a high enough contrast from your knitting yarn. Otherwise it's going to be a little bit difficult to see these bars. When we get up to the yarn carrier, we can't hang anymore. The needles are down, they're out of the way. So we need to move the yarn guide. Since we don't have any weight, we're going to have to hold this down by hand. If you put the weight back on, I'm going to just tug down on my cast on bonnet. You'll see that there's not enough tension up here. So we actually need to just grab it, use our fingers. It's actually a little pocket right here. It almost looks like a little toe or a little heel. So just grab your fingers and pull it down. Make sure that you have tension in this area so all the stitches are going to knit. And then slowly move your yarn carrier around out of the way. Now that it's out of the way, I can hang a few more stitches. I can't go any further, so again I need to hold this down. I do it again by hand, and I'm going to go slowly, and now these are double stitches, so we want to make sure that everything is going to knit. So pull down on everything. I find it's a little easier if I just tap on my handle. Alright, I've gone past the beginning, so now I'm going to hang the rest. This was the little tail that I cut off. It's all woven in, so now I'm just going to tuck it, and it's going to become part of the hem. So I grab these bars and I finish hanging them. You want to be careful you don't grab the wrong one. I'm going to zoom in here so we can have a little peek. It's very easy to grab one above, but it's not the right one. If you look down here, there's a bar below it. That's the one you need to grab. So this was the very first one. I've got 1, 2, 3 needles left. I need to find 3 bars. They get a little more difficult to find as you get to the end. So there's 1, 2, and here is the last one. This one is very tricky to find. That is why I also put a marker on it. Now I can just pick up the marker and hang it over the needle. That's it, and it's all hung. Because I can now put even pressure on my setup bonnet, I can put the weights back on it. So I'll put the weights back on my setup bonnet. Everything is pulled down tight. And now I'm going to finish that one row. You want to knit it slowly and make sure that everything is going to catch. It's very easy to get a dropped stitch. So as you see, going slowly, everything is knitting. So this is where I'll reset my counter and start knitting. There you have it. That's how you make a hung hem. I'm just going to take it off the machine so we can have a little look-see how it turned out. So there we are. There's my hung hem. It'll be much easier to see once we remove the waste yarn. For the waste yarn, one of the ways I like to remove it is just to take and clip it and get it out of the way. You want to make sure you're not catching the regular yarn that you knit with. This one is white, it's cotton, I clip it, and now I should be able to pull that through. Oops. That was just my knuckle hitting a little wooden bit. There it is again, pull it off. And there we have it. I actually like that. I like how it turned out, making that 1.5 inch. It almost pulls in a little bit, as if it was ribbed, perhaps. That may be my go-to hem from now on. 1.5 inch instead of 1. Pardon me, I keep catching it on my needles. So there you are. And if you look on the inside, everything is attached. That little end, we don't even know where it is. Oh, there, right in here. If you look closely, this is where we wove it in as we knit. So there's nothing to finish. It's done. It's ready to go, and you just need to worry about making the rest of your sock. Thank you.